Okay. Gentlemen, you are going to meet Mr. Gary Thompson. He will be who you will go to next. Mr. Gary Thompson was a scientist that worked in the space program down at Cape Canaveral, Florida. Okay? And when I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting him and found out who he was, I said, oh my God, you have to come present to my scouts. And then I started thinking about what am I going to do with this, because the scouts, the young people of today, don't even know we ever went to the moon. Okay, so I felt like I needed to give you a little bit of a presentation, a pre-thing that would give you an idea of what happened that led up to us landing on the moon. All right, can I please have quiet? Excuse me, we are videotaping here, so if you need to speak, can you please step out, because he's going to pick up the ambient noise. Okay? Thank you very much. All right, you guys are not going to show up. He's unfortunately videotaping me. All right, so the race to the moon. Whoops. Let me back up. Previous. All right. Did you know that before we had this as today's computer, we had this? This is a computer called the ENIAC. All right, this took up an entire room. It was made with vacuum tubes, and you guys don't even know what a vacuum tube is. Okay? This ENIAC machine had 1/10 of the computing power that this guy has. 1/10, which means 10 of those guys to do this. Okay? That before we had the stealth bomber. Who can tell me where the stealth bomber is housed? Ha! Gotcha. Whiteman Air Force Base in the center of the state of Missouri. All right? All of those things live there. All right? This guy on the bottom is the B-25 bomber. This is the bomber that won World War II. All right? That before we have this is state-of-the-art rocketry. Okay? The deal with this is the fuel injector is injected to form a tornado in the inside of the burning chamber. A tornado. You will learn about tornadoes on Thursday at the weather presentation. Okay? But the fuel that comes in and forms a tornado before it is ignited. That helps with the thrust. This was one of the first rockets that were ever made. This is Robert Goddard. He is the what is he? He's the master of modern rocketry. Okay, on July 21st, 1969, astronaut Neil Armstrong. Okay, understand, guys, that this was a major thing that happened in my lifetime. I get very emotional about this. So you can laugh at me all you want to, but when the Apollo 11 rocket took off, I was crying like a baby, and I was 16 years old. Okay? All right, astronaut Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. Okay? That person that you see is Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin was the second man on the moon. Neil Armstrong is holding the camera and taking the photograph. Okay? Neil Armstrong came off of this footpad right here that you can barely see. And what he said was, does anybody know?
One step for mankind, one giant leap.
You're really, really close. One small step for man.
One giant step for mankind.
Giant leap for mankind. Okay? See, you guys know this. You don't even realize you know it. Okay? So this is the 45th anniversary. Why did we do this? Now I'm sure, huh? Absolutely right. Why did President Kennedy do this? because things were getting really tense. All right? Russia was mad at us and we were mad at them. And so there was tension, tension, tension. We were going to, all of a sudden, we were going to be having, yes?
So Russia sent out the Sputnik, and then the Americans were afraid that Sputnik would be something else more powerful, like a super weapon to destroy them.
Right.
So that started the space race.
Okay, so the deal with Sputnik was a rocket that put the very first satellite in the sky. Okay, but the fear was that satellite in the sky could have bombs in it that could be shot down onto the United States. So in order to defuse this whole idea of weapons in space, President Kennedy decided that we were going to have a friendly race to the moon. It was going to be a competition. All right? We also were trying to see whether or not we could terraform the moon and establish it as a colony. We were also needing to get a telescope out in space. Now, why do we need a telescope in space?
So you can spy on our enemies.
Say it again?
So you can spy on our enemies.
Oh, come on. There's more reason than that. Why do we need a telescope in
To
space?
see who actually won the space race.
We won the space. Well, we won the race to the moon. Okay. There's more to the space race than just the going to the moon part. Okay? All right. What is the problem with trying to see things that are happening in space from here on Earth?
It's like billions of miles.
Well, it's not that much shorter to put a telescope into orbit. What is in the way of us being able to see things that are out in space? Well, clouds, which are part of the
Atmosphere.
There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. The atmosphere is in the way. Okay? If we have a telescope that is on the other side of the atmosphere, then the atmosphere is not going to give us any interference. Okay? All right, so the result is that we now have a high-tech space station. We now have a high-quality space telescope. We made huge advances in engineering in general. And we now know a whole lot about how well humans adapt to weightlessness. Did I see a hand?
Never mind.
Okay. All right, but this was the first step on a long road. There were 4 phases to the race to the moon. The Mercury program. The question that the Mercury program wanted to answer was, can a man be sent into space and come back safely? The Gemini program, can a crew of 2 men be sent into space for days, exit the vehicle safely, dock with another vehicle, and come back safely? The Apollo program, can a crew of 3 men be sent in space for days, land on the moon, drive around a little bit, and come back safely? The shuttle program then, can a crew of 7 men and women be sent into space in a reusable vessel, saving a lot of money, be brought back to Earth in that reusable vessel safely, and perform experiments while in space? Okay? So the Mercury program, I'm going to go through this stuff a little fast. Okay, Mercury was named after the first planet from the sun. It went from 1958 to 1963. These were the original 7 Mercury astronauts. John Glenn is up there. Okay, Gus Grissom is up there. All right, so there were 6 Mercury missions, and this is what they did. The first one, Freedom 7, all it did was go up and come right back down. Wanted to see if man could survive being shot into space. And then Faith 7, we shot him into space and he circled the Earth 22 times before he came back. Okay? This is the hardware. This is a Atlas rocket. That is a Redstone rocket. There were 2 different kinds of rockets depending on what was going to be done. LOX stands for liquid oxygen. That was the fuel that was made. Here it was mixed with kerosene. That scares the pooey out of me. And there it was mixed with alcohol. All right? The mercury capsule, if any one of you guys have a grandparent that worked at McDonnell Douglas during this, if they worked at McDonnell Douglas, then they might have been working on the mercury capsule or the Gemini capsule. They were both built right here in St. Louis, Missouri. Okay? Full-scale mock-ups, which means that they're pretend, okay, are available to look at in the prologue room at Boeing. And here's the website where you can get a group together and schedule a tour of the prologue room. It's awesome. Okay? Problem solved. The second mission, Liberty Bell 7 with Gus Grissom, sank immediately upon splashdown. The Navy worked a miracle and got him back. Okay? The major problem that we needed to address with these programs is the heat that happens when you try to bring something back through the atmosphere. The atmosphere is 5 miles high. That's a lot of atmosphere we got to go through. Okay? This is what I'm talking about. As you're coming through the atmosphere, this is the shield that has to do something about deflecting the heat so the guys in here don't cook. All right? So the heat shield on Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo literally burned away. It disappeared. Okay? You follow that? All right, so these guys could come back safely. All right, during the Mercury missions, the invention of a protection from the heat of returning to Earth was a major milestone. Okay, the second part was the Gemini flights. The Gemini astronauts, this is 9 of the 16. Okay, cool dudes. I would have loved to have been any one of them. Okay, unmanned test. Okay, we don't really see anything happening here important until Gemini 8. Gemini 8 was docking with a different piece of equipment that was up in space, and one of the thrusters misfired. And it started tumbling. These guys ended up getting sick all over the inside of their capsule. Okay? This thing started tumbling out of control until Neil Armstrong, who was the pilot, was able to bring it back under control. But the mission was aborted early, and they came back early. Okay, so this was the first real space emergency. Okay? For the Gemini program, we have the Titan II rocket and the Gemini space capsule built by McDonnell Douglas. All right, and this is what I was talking about, the Agena space dock. There was a piece of hardware that was sent up in space so that the guys in the capsule could figure out whether or not they could get the two pieces joined together. They could dock one into the other. This was going to be necessary for the trip to the moon. Okay, so they figured out that they can do this. That way they can control that capsule and dock it into another piece of hardware. Okay, problems solved and questions answered. The flights utilized new rocket fuel and the new design of fuel cells. You hear about fuel cells, don't you? Don't you hear about fuel cells with cars? There are cars that run on fuel cells. This is where it came from. Okay, we can keep a man alive outside of the vehicle in space and reseal the capsule. Think about how important this is. They opened up the doors of that Gemini space capsule and got out of it. Walked around in space. Then they got back in and sealed it up again and was able to release the oxygen, and the oxygen held inside of the capsule. This had never been done before. Okay? Man can exist in space for days at a time. Pilots can put their craft in any position they want and can dock with another piece of hardware safely. When a crisis happened, we were prepared and we got the astronauts back safely. And systems were tested to their limits. That's why this particular program went so long. They wanted to make sure that this hardware could handle everything that could be thrown at it, tested to its limits. Okay? All right, so during the Gemini missions, the new technology that was being invented on the spot did well and was tested hard for going to the moon. And we proved that a crew of humans can live in space for days. Apollo, after the ancient god of light. The Apollo 11 astronauts are these three gentlemen here. Okay, this is Neil Armstrong, this is Buzz Aldrin, and this is Michael Collins. So, if we're going to land on the moon, what's the problem that we have with coming back?
The atmosphere.
No, the moon has no atmosphere.
Gravity.
Gravity. We got to have a rocket to get us back up. Okay? So what do we have to do? We have to take our rocket with us. And that's called the Lunar Excursion Module. Okay? So, here is our anatomy lesson. This is stage 1. This is stage 2. This is stage 3. Most of this was lost before we ever even left Earth or left orbit. Okay? This is where the LEM is. And the only piece that ever came back is this little guy right here. Right up there at the top where the arrow is pointing. All that, rest of that was lost and discarded. Okay? Say it again.
Probably hit another planet like Mars or something.
No, 90% of it comes back into the Earth's atmosphere, and what happens is it's coming through the Earth's atmosphere. It burns up. Okay? There you go. All right? But some of it actually got left where? On the moon. Okay? Because this is the piece that came down to the moon. This is called the Lunar Excursion Module. This is the one that lands safely. See, this is a big engine under here. Do you see the rays of stuff moving away? Because this engine came down slowly and put this guy on the moon. This is the ascent stage. This is going back to the capsule. This thing's staying on the moon. Okay? So now you see the ascent stage. They're done on the moon. They're back, and they're getting back into the capsule to come back to Earth. And this is coming back to Earth. You see that little capsule at the top is the only thing that comes back. Okay, so these are the missions. The only one I really want to talk about is number 1. This was the first time people died in the space program. This was a very sad day. The rocket was not being tested. The rocket was not even being lit. What they were doing was they had the guys go into the capsule fully suited. Then they pressurized the capsule with oxygen to see if it was going to seal and work right with them inside of their suits. Well, what they put in there was almost pure oxygen, and something sparked. Now, what happens when you have a spark in an oxygen atmosphere? Kaflooey! Okay, all 3 of these poor gentlemen died within about, and they burned. Okay? The next milestone is Apollo 8. Okay? They were the first men to see the far side of the moon. All right, let's have a little demonstration here. Can I have you 2 gentlemen, please? Who wants to be the Earth and who wants to be the moon? You'll be the Earth? Okay, here's my Earth. All right, you're facing Earth. Now come over here and face Earth. No, you stand still, don't you move. Okay, no, come over here and face Earth. Face Earth. Now come over here and face Earth. Now come over here and face Earth. Okay, do you see that the same side of the moon is always facing the Earth? Why? Because it's been 3 billion years, and that's the pattern it's fallen into. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. You can sit down. Okay, so these are the first people to ever see the far side of the moon. And Earthrise. What do I mean by Earthrise? I'll show you a slide. Apollo 9, Apollo 10, Apollo 11, man steps forth on the moon. What did he say? First small,
Step for man, one
giant leap for mankind. What was said when the capsule touched down? The eagle has landed. Okay? I have clips, but it always makes me cry. Okay, Apollo 13. This was the second disaster, and they made a movie out of it. Okay, remember I told you that we have the command module is sitting on top of the service module? Okay, do you remember that? Okay, the service module was called the service module because the stuff that the guys needed to live on was stored in there. Things like oxygen and water and stuff like that. So in Apollo 13, the oxygen tank on the service module blew up. What does this mean to them? Are these guys going to have what they need? They have no air to breathe. Okay, so this is the one they made the movie out of, Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks. Houston, we have a problem. Okay, they scrubbed the mission. They never ever left Earth orbit because what they had to do was use the oxygen that was in the LEM as a lifeboat to get them back home. Okay? Apollo 14, Alan Shepard makes a Gulf shot. Famous picture, it was all over the newspapers. Okay, Apollo 15, for the first time we used the lunar rover. Now what is that? Oh my God, it's a car. We took a car to the moon. We drove around on the moon. Okay? And we did it 3 times and we left the cars behind. Okay? All right, so we did the lunar rover. This is what I mean by Earthrise. Until we went to the moon, we had never seen this view. Okay? This is where the footprints and the wheel prints are on the moon. Okay? And guess what? They're still there. Why?
Because there's no wind.
There's no wind, there's no air, there's no rain. Yes?
At Washington University, they have a cave, which is a virtual reality environment room. And they actually have the high-resolution imagery of number 15. And you can stand in it and look around and see the tracks going up the hills where they went to collect rock samples. And
Oh my God, is that open to the public?
I believe you can get in there.
Okay, what is it again?
It's called the cave. I can give you some information.
All right, thank you. I would love that. I am such a space freak. I've been a space freak since I was this big. Okay?
It's really cool though. I mean, it's like you're standing on the moon looking around.
I totally believe it. All right. There is Alan Shepard doing his Gulf shot. Okay. Apollo 17 was the first time we took off at night so you could see the light show at all of its glory. Okay. So, what is this over here? What's this? That's the space shuttle. Do we see a little difference in height here?
Yeah.
Okay. And we see that that little thing where that little circle is the only piece that came back. So the whole rest of it was wasted. Okay? So do you see why one of the major criticisms we had of the space program at this point was how expensive it was?
Yes.
Okay. That is what the inside of the Apollo capsule looks like. This is the space capsule on top of the service module, and that's what I was talking about. One of the tanks in there, the oxygen tanks, is the one that ruptured in Apollo 13. The LEM was built by Grumman, and that is the whole thing. This is them coming out of the capsule to get into here to go down to the moon. When they come back from the moon, this piece is left behind, and this is the only piece that comes back. There's the lunar rover. Okay?
Yeah, you go off a little ramp and you're flying.
Well, you know, yeah, there is less gravity on the moon, but you're not going to fly forever because the moon does have some gravity. Okay, so you're not going to go, okay, you are going to go, okay. All right, so this is where the lunar rover was stored when it went into space. And this is, I love this picture. This is the guys putting it away, putting it where it belongs. So, yes, dear.
It'd be really hard to play baseball on the moon. Whack!
Well, no, actually, it wouldn't be hard to play baseball. Well, getting the pitch to you might be a little hard. You'd probably have to do more t-ball than baseball. But you know what? Everything would be a home run. Okay? All right, so this is what the lunar rover could do. They packed a lot of information in there. Okay? All right, so problems solved and questions answered. We have a lot of moon rocks that we collected. Now, why would moon rocks give us important information? Why?
See if one of the theories is true about the moon came off the Earth.
Well, there is that, but why would the moon rocks tell us that?
Because they have the same material as Earth. They're really from the Earth.
Okay, that's a totally valid point. But the thing about the moon rocks is there's no weather on the moon. So there's no rain, there's no wind, there's nothing. So those rocks that exist on the moon have been unchanged for billions and billions of years. Okay, well, we can't find that anywhere here on the Earth. Every place on the Earth has weather. Okay, so a lot of experiments were performed in space, but there were still many that couldn't because of space constrictions. All right, so much of the hardware was discarded. The program was seen as too expensive. There had to be a way to make it more worth the cost, especially when you include the failure of Apollo 13. Apollo 13 gained us no information. Okay, so the Apollo missions, the USA won the race to the moon. We did. Okay, and invented completely new technologies in order to do it. Information was gained about the formation of the solar system, and now that the frontier had been opened, amazing ideas were being considered for continuing into space. The space shuttle program ran for 30 years. That's pretty cool when you think about it. Okay? Because of the space shuttle program, we have the Hubble Space Telescope, and we have the International Space Station. And the International Space Station, by the way, is truly international. There's about 10 different countries involved in it. Yes?
One of them is Canada, and I think it made the arm.
Okay. Korea's involved, and China's involved. I mean, it truly has been, you know, we broke down all of the politics and stuff like that to be a part of that, okay? In the space shuttle program, typically 7 people would fly, all right, and they were chosen from various walks of life. The first American women in space were some of the space shuttle personnel. And in this regard, and speaking as a female, I feel pretty strongly about this. You know, this is one of the points in which America was behind Russia, seriously, because one of the first cosmonauts that Russia ever sent into space was a woman. And we didn't send a woman into space until the space shuttle program. Okay, as a woman, to me, that's a big old boo-hiss. Okay, and then we had the first African and Asian Americans in space. All right, so this is the space shuttle. The orange thing is basically just a shell for gases that are used to be fuel for the flight. And that is the only piece that is not recovered and reused. The 2 things off to the side are called the solid rocket boosters. That is, the fuel that is in there is solid. They have GPS chips in them. When they are used up and fall off, they can find them and use them again. And then, of course, the space shuttle goes up, goes into orbit, and then comes back down to Earth and flies down like an airplane. Okay, so the shuttle lands back on Earth. There's only 2 places that had a long enough runway, that's the word I'm looking for, runway to land the shuttle in. It took a very long runway. Okay, that was out in California and in Florida. And the choice of landing was dependent on what the weather was. Wherever the weather was better is where they came down. Yes?
If it looks like the space shuttle has burn marks.
Well, it is. Okay, what is burning?
The tires.
The tires, and every airplane does that. If you stand there and watch an airplane that is coming in, and at the airport, if you watch them, you'll always see a little poof of smoke coming off of the wheels. Part of what we pay for every time we get on an airplane is we're paying for the tires. Okay? All right, so if the space shuttle landed in California, it had to be sent back to Florida. Okay, so this is how it was brought back to Florida. There was one point during the 30 years where there was a weather problem in Florida, so they diverted to St. Louis. We did not have a long enough runway, so there was all kinds of, oh my God, but they did make it. They landed it because the guy was really, really good. They landed it in St. Louis, and oh my God, was there a free fall about that. Okay? But it just happened one time. Okay? Okay, do you remember me talking about this, the heat shield on the Mercuries, the Geminis, and the Apollos? The heat shield burned away, right? All right, if we're going to use or have a reusable rocket, then the heat shield can't be burning away. We had to find a way of shielding against the heat that was not going to be something that was going to have to be replaced every time. So that led to the invention of this thing called high-capacity ceramic, which is one of the best inventions that we have as a result of the space program. If your mother has pans that she has bought within the past 20 years, she may have some of this high-capacity ceramic. If you have, there's a certain brand of stovetop that doesn't have coils or burners or anything like that, that has a ceramic stovetop. That happened. Each one of those tiles was numbered and was placed by computers onto the surface of the space capsule, and they were monitored very, very carefully. At the beginning of the space shuttle program, they had a problem with the glue letting go. The first 2 or 3 space shuttle shots that came back, there was always, oh my God, the tiles are falling off. It was like the 4th or 5th flight where they finally solved that problem and the tiles did not fall off anymore. Okay? So that's what the heat shield looks like. Each one of those pieces were placed by computer. There were 6 shuttles. The Enterprise, who's a Trekkie? Oh my God, you're a Trekkie? Tell me you're a Trekkie. Okay. My son, who was born in 1984, can tell you Star Trek episodes down to the start date. I'm not that much into it.
I'm not that. He's just getting started.
Okay, so have you seen the original Khan? Have you seen the original Khan? Okay, well, you know, the original Star Trek episode, there were only 3 or 4 episodes that were really any good once you look back on them, but that was one of them. Okay, all right, so there were originally 6 shuttle. We lost the Challenger early on in the program, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. The Endeavour was built to replace the Challenger. Okay, but in the 30 years of the space shuttle program, we had 2 disasters, and even though the disasters were very bad and we were very, very sad about them, I still consider that a pretty good track record. Yes, dear?
In the Challenger, one, there's a building place for it somewhere in St. Louis.
I can't hear you, dear.
There's the building for the Challenger somewhere in St. Louis. And also
Not in St. Louis. There's a building for the Challenger down in Kennedy. Okay, it is the Challenger Museum. Okay?
the Challenger, I think, had a teacher in there who was going to teach.
Krista McAuliffe. Okay? All right, this is Endeavour, because the space shuttle program has ended. All of the space shuttles have been retired, and they are now put on permanent displays at various places. I love this picture because how many times did you see a space shuttle with cars all around it and buildings all around it? Okay? You never see that. So I love this picture. Okay, so this is the Challenger disaster. I was at home with my babies. My son Michael was not quite 2 years old, about 1.5 years. and my son Matthew was a baby in my arms, and I was watching this. They broke in, and you could see immediately from the first image that they showed you that this was not a good thing. The phone was right here. I reached over and picked up the phone and called my husband, who worked at McDonnell Douglas at the time, and I told him the Challenger has just blown up immediately after launch, and he turned around and told all of the people he worked with. They were the first people that knew, because I told them immediately. Okay? Yeah, Krista McAuliffe, Mrs. Krista McAuliffe, she was the first and actual only member of a program called Teacher in Space that was selected to go into space, and because that's as far as she got, the program was actually canceled after that. Okay? This was a very, very sad day.
I was in 8th grade when we were watching, and they like kind of canceled the rest of classes that day and kind of walked us through this weird grieving thing. It was really bizarre.
This is one of the first times that you saw a disaster of this magnitude the minute it happened. Okay, this was, you know, in terms of media history and all that stuff, this was a landmark moment. Okay? But it wasn't the only one. We also lost the Columbia. All right, now the Columbia broke up on re-entry. And since we are talking about 5 miles of atmosphere, there's not a whole lot of cameras out there. So we don't have any pictures of this. So all of the pieces flew back into space, but it broke up in re-entry. A piece of foam insulation had fallen off of one of the wings, and as it flew by the shuttle, it damaged another part of the shuttle. And the shuttle broke apart because of it. Okay? But there were 2 disasters. In 30 years, there were 2. Okay? So this is the good things. This is actually a picture of the Mir from another spacecraft that was sent up to be part of but this is not the International Space Station, because this is the one that came before it. This is the Mir, and that is the shuttle Atlantis docked to it. It's going to be interesting to see if I make it through 4 presentations here. All right, that's what the space station looks like. What are those black things?
The solar panels.
The what?
Solar panels.
Solar panels. And what are the solar panels doing?
They collect energy from the sun.
And turn it into?
Energy. Electricity.
Electricity. All right. We're collecting energy. So this is green. I mean, it's kind of silly to be talking about green in space, but it is green. We are reusing and using energy that is not costing us any money. There's the Hubble Space Telescope. And as far as I'm concerned, this makes everything worthwhile, because these are the things that we can see at with the Hubble that we can't see here on Earth.
That's cool.
Okay?
It looks like such
Most of these things are nebulae, which nebulae is a newly formed ball, gas, pocket of gas that is still burning, so to speak, so it is still glowing. Yes?
There's a nebula called the rotten egg, and it's made a lot of sulfur.
It's made of a lot of things, okay? This is back to those of you who want to learn, who want to work on the NOVA Award. You want to get on the PBS website and watch Cosmos. Yes, dear?
I have your number award.
You have, cool, that's cool.
These are dispersed supernovas.
Okay.
Me and my family have finished the whole entire series of Cosmos.
You see, the first one was better. I'm sorry, but it was. Okay. All right, I have more pictures from Hubble. That is called the Butterfly Nebulae, and this is called the Horsehead Nebula.
That looks more like an elephant. Looks like a guy with a big, it looks like a chin.
Okay, they're actually anticipating that this is the beginning of the accretion disk in the inside. It's called an accretion disk, that when it compacts and compacts and compacts and compacts and compacts, then it's going to become a black hole.
That one.
Okay, the one on the top where you can see the part that comes together like this. Okay,
Yeah, like stars, they're really old.
they're making stars. A nebula is making stars.
Yeah, but
It's,
I'm talking about how they make, another way they make black holes is the star collapse on itself when it's about to
there you go. Okay, there's more than one way.
That one kind of looks like a shadow monster or something.
Yeah, but they're trying to be nice and so they call it horsehead. Okay? All right. So were the pictures worth the space program?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. I am done. I don't know what I'm doing in terms of time. Okay. Okay. Did you enjoy it?
Yes.
All righty. Thank you. Okay. That's it.
Thank you.